Hey guys, what's up? Jesse here from Canadian DIY, and today we're going to install baseboard like a pro. I'm going to show you how to install the main base itself as well as a corner, show you how to get those perfect miters, and we're also going to go over a bunch of tips and tricks to make a job go from good to great. I'm going to go into a fair amount of detail on this, so stick with me. I'm going to show you how to do it right now. Okay, obviously first things first, you need your baseboard. I'm just using flat stock here. This matches the theme and the style that I'm going for in my house. But if you have a very detailed baseboard, a tall, a short, anything like that, doesn't matter. These same tricks are gonna work. Secondly, you wanna make sure that your base is pre-painted. It saves you a lot of time and a lot of steps later on. So make sure it's pre-painted. This is just nothing more than a basic trim paint. It's pure white, semi-gloss, nothing crazy. Couple coats, make sure it's pre-painted. Okay, so from there what we're going to do is we're going to take our base and we're going to stand it up and put it up against the wall. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slide it that direction, or that direction if that's the way you're going, towards your door casing or a corner or whatever it may be. So we're going to snug it up tight. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take and make a mark. Now we're going to make this mark about 1/8 of an inch long. The reason being is you can always take more off. You can't put more back on once it's already cut off. So what we're going to do is we're going to sneak up on this. Now the reason being is it's really easy to cut these miter joints too short. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and make our mark about 1/8 of an inch long, and then we're going to make a second mark going at an angle. This will tell me the direction that I need my saw blade to go. Now I've already got my other piece pre-cut, and this fits right in there. If you want, you can also make a second line, and that will basically tell me where I need my saw blade to start and where I need it to finish. Let's go to the saw. And now with Slade valiantly watching our progress, what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece of base and we're going to slide it back up tight, just like that. And then down here, we'll check our fit. Now as you can see, we are a little bit long, but that's okay. I said we can always take more off. So what we're going to do is we're going to shave a little bit off the other side. We're just going to take it off the straight corner. Now what we can do is we can take and compare it to our other piece here. By the looks of that, we're not overly long. So we're literally gonna have to take off just half the width of the saw blade is all, which is good. So now one thing I gotta mention too is when you're doing this, make sure that your saw blade is starting at the front of your base and the blade is coming out on the back side. That way if there's any chipping or tear out or anything, it's happening on the rear and not on the face. You never wanna cut your base this way and have the blade coming out on the front. Otherwise you're gonna have a lot of tearing and chip out that you'll have to fix later. Okay, now I shaved about 1/16 of an inch off the back side there. So now what we're gonna do is take another test fit, slide it up tight. And we'll take our other corner, put it in there, and as you can see, that is a perfect fit. So now, before you get all slap happy and start just nailing that thing into the stud that's back here, there's a trick that we're gonna do. So we just spent a lot of time getting our miter joint absolutely perfect. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep it, because what can happen is if you start just nailing this guy in, this one can push or that one can push and they can move each other around. Sometimes the walls aren't straight and the bottom can kick in and the top can kick out, and you can end up with a funny looking joint like that, or vice versa. Sometimes the top can push in and the bottom can be out, or whatever have you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep our miter joint, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take and we're gonna glue our outside corners. If it's an inside corner, you don't necessarily need to glue it, but on outside corners, you always wanna glue it. That way the joint doesn't contort or push apart or pull apart over time. We're gonna use painter's tape as well. We're gonna tape up the joint to hold it in place while the glue dries. You wanna use painter's tape on this. It's a lower tack or stickiness than a masking tape. Masking tape is really, really sticky. You can actually start to peel away the paint when you go to take it off, because this will have to be on there for about a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever your glue drying time is. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and run a pretty generous bead of glue down our board. Now stand it up and stand up your other piece. Push them together. Now we're going to take our tape, peel off a chunk probably about 4 inches or so. We're going to put it on our base. Now we're going to pull it tight and wrap it around the other side, making sure that they're flush on top. You don't want one to be too high compared to the other. Do it again. We're going to put this one, wipe off any glue squeeze out. And this one is going to go on the bottom. You're going to pull it tight and press it in. Now this will hold our perfect miter. Now we just got to wait for the glue to dry before we go ahead and nail that in place. Alright, it's been about an hour now. My glue is good and dry. Now I should mention obviously that while you're waiting for this corner to dry, you're probably going around and installing more baseboard on other windows, doors, casing, stuff like that, around other floors, hallways, whatever have you. So yeah, this is good and dry, so now we're going to go ahead and remove the tape. Now we're going to remove it up to the corner and stop. We're going to take this side and remove it up to the corner, and then we're going to peel this off. The reason being is if we just took it right around the corner, you would end up peeling the paint off. See, it's already starting to lift there a little bit, but you would start peeling it off onto this piece of base over there, which you don't want. Go ahead, remove this one. And then remove this one. Peel it off in the corner. Don't worry about whatever comes up right now, it's not a big deal. We're gonna fix that in the next step. So for right now, we're gonna go ahead, we can nail this on. Now the corner pieces, we're gonna go ahead and put 2 nails, 2 nails, and 2 nails right there, just to hold this guy good and steady onto the wall. Just make sure that when you put 2 nails on this side and then 2 nails on that side, your nails don't run into each other, so just offset them a little bit. Push it down to the floor. Just like that. All right, so now when it comes down to putting the nails into the rest of the baseboard, what you're gonna wanna do is put them into a stud. So we're just gonna take a stud finder, run it along the wall, find the stud, just make a small little pencil mark. And from there, what you can do is typically interior walls like this on a house usually will be 16 inches on center. Sometimes they'll be 24. So what you can do is once you take your first mark, go ahead and put the tape measure down. And when you go out to your 16-inch measurement, you should notice that there should be another stud at least somewhere in the neighborhood right here. And then again, after that, you can just keep stretching out the tape measure, keep going in on your 16-inch increments until the whole piece is nailed in. All right, now we got the baseboard nailed in place. What we're gonna do now is around each nail hole, the MDF, the baseboard, kind of swells up a little bit. So if you go ahead and you just slap some paint over that right now, obviously you're still gonna see the indent of the nail hole. And then around that, you're actually gonna see it swell up. Now you can just go ahead and fill the nail holes and paint them, but you'll still see the little marks where it swells up depending on how the light hits it. So what I like to do is just take a little putty knife and just lightly just shave the tops off. That's literally all there is to it. It doesn't take much. Just shaving the tops off of them, just flattening them out is all it is. Now after that, we're gonna take a little bit of spackling compound. It's just regular old drywall spackle. I like this stuff. It's pink right now. It turns white when it's dry. Just gonna take a little bit and just wipe it into the holes. Take another finger, just sort of wipe it off, smooth it out, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and do that to all the nail holes. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to caulk the seam while the mud's drying. Then we'll come back and we'll paint it, and we'll be all good to go. All right, now we're gonna move on to what can be the most daunting part for some people, and that's putting on the silicone. So now, what I've got here is an actual trim and baseboard silicone. Now the reason you're gonna wanna use something like this as opposed to a less expensive silicone, again, this stuff is a little bit more expensive per tube, but if you read the back of it, this stuff is actually very flexible. If you get the less expensive stuff, it is only mild to moderately flexible, depending on what type you get. Now, we do only have a small gap to fill. Some places you might have a little bit larger of a gap to fill, but I've literally seen that stuff crack and the gaps start to open back up again within 2 weeks of applying it, just because of seasonal temperature changes, humidity changes, the ground shifting, things like that. This stuff is very flexible, so you're not gonna have that gap starting to open back up. Now, there are measurements on the very top of the tube. I've actually cut mine at a smaller than 1/8 of an inch, and I've cut it at a 45-degree angle. That'll just help with application. Now the reason I've cut it so small is, again, we only have a very small gap to fill. You can always add more caulking to the joint if need be. And the same as our corner, you don't want to cut it too big to start. You can always cut it bigger after the fact if you need to, just shave it off a little bit larger. But again, start small. You can always make it bigger. You can't make it smaller. So now, just gonna load that into the tube. And then one thing is with this for application, we're just gonna apply a very thin bead. Then we're gonna go back and use a dry finger. Some people like to use a wet finger. Again, there's no right or wrong way to it. Some people like to use roundover tools. The reason I don't like the roundover tool is because if you use that, you have no tactile feedback like you do with your finger. In other words, if the caulking starts building up on the back side of your finger or the roundover tool, you can't feel that. And in other words, after it starts to build up, you can have it start pushing up the wall out onto the baseboard, and it's just a pain to clean. So I like to use my finger. Hold your finger again at about a 45-degree angle and just press into it, and you'll start to pull your finger across. As you start to feel the caulking build up on the back side, just take your finger, wipe it off on your towel, and keep on going. Other than that, it's really, really simple. I'm gonna show you how to do it. All right, so now the last step we got to do is just paint our nail holes. Again, that's just going to be nice and simple because our baseboard has already been pre-painted. All we literally have to do is touch them up. It doesn't take much. One coat is usually enough. Now, I'm using a tapered brush here. In other words, the bristles go down at an angle. You can use a straight brush, but a nice high quality tapered brush, usually has non-synthetic fibers, is probably going to be your best bet. It'll leave the smoothest finish. Same paint as we have on the baseboard already, just go ahead, dip it in. We're just literally going to touch up nail holes. Come at it from a couple different directions just to kind of hide them a little bit better. Again, it doesn't take much. If you're worried about getting too close to the floor as well, you can take a piece of paper and just kind of tuck it underneath the baseboard and then paint along that. That way you don't worry about getting any paint on the floor. And for our corner, same thing. We're just going to paint pulling across the front of it at the start. Now we're going to touch up the nail holes at the same time. Pulling our paint across. And we'll come at it from this way. Pull the paint across. And we'll touch up the top. Well guys, that's it. That's all it takes to install baseboard like a pro. I hope you learned something today. I'll link everything I use in the description box down below. And remember, like, comment, subscribe, everything like that. I'll see you next time.